if the panelists want to turn on their cameras, that'd be good. And let me just start by welcoming everyone. Welcome to a town hall. It's virtual, but it's for real. It's not just virtual, it is online. A town hall for the city of Guelph on council composition and ward boundary review. And today is about reviewing the preliminary ward boundary options. So the purpose here today is to equip people to participate and understand and provide really interesting and valuable feedback to the consulting group. So the agenda for today is real simple, giving you an overview and we'll do an introduction to the event. There'll be an official welcome. And then the bulk of it will be a presentation. The presentation will give you finding from the first round of consultation, then some assessment of the current wards, and then number 4 there is a walkthrough of all of the preliminary options, and then we'll wrap up with some further indications of how you get involved in this round 2 of 3 public consultations on the ward boundaries. We want to get through as much as possible within as short amount of time as possible. It'll probably take about an hour to get through to the point of saying, okay, let's answer all your questions and lay out some of the next steps. Next. So some of the assumptions here, it's a very open meeting, and we're approaching this in a way that is supposed to be very receptive. We really, really need your insights. So our starting assumptions are that everyone has wisdom and that we need everyone's wisdom in order to produce the wisest results. That means if you've got an insight, you're not sure about it, doesn't matter. You got half an answer, doesn't matter, share it. If you got a question and part of your brain says, oh, maybe it's a dumb question, turn off that part of your brain. Don't worry about it. If you've got the question, chances are somebody else does too. So share that question, share those insights. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts is another assumption. We're here not to chase down any one idea, but to collect up as many ideas as possible to catch the whole range of wisdom and insights that we can possibly gather so that we can move on to the next step. It's really important to understand that there's no wrong answers tonight. It's not about rightness and wrongness. There's no argument to win. There's no point to lose. There's no dumb questions. There's no winning and losing here. It's just let's share the insights and gather the questions, and we'll do our best to answer your questions as honestly and openly as we can. Move on, please. Next slide. The purpose of this meeting really is to learn. We want to make sure that everybody in Guelph can learn enough about this project that they can provide deep insights and advice to the consulting team that are putting together some recommendations for ward configurations here. So if you can learn enough, then you'll be able to provide input around the ward boundary options, and we're presenting some preliminary ones today, so we need to move from preliminary to preferred based on your input, so that in the end, when we come to council with a report, the council can be confident that yes, the community was able to provide valuable input here. Next. Simple process tonight. There's going to be presentation, and throughout that presentation, you ask as many questions and land as many comments as you can that we can collect, okay? You put those questions and comments directly into the chat box in WebEx or the comment box in Facebook if you're following on Facebook. And as soon as you get a question that pops into your head, you just type it. Just put her in there. Don't hold back, so that you can keep hearing the rest of the presentation and allow that to stimulate more questions. So throughout the presentation, if you're popping questions in those 2 chat boxes, we will be grabbing those questions and setting aside not them, then so that we can ask those questions to the panelists after their presentation. Any questions that we can't answer this evening, that happens, we'll do our best to get an answer, and the place to look for it will be on a website specially designed for this project called haveyoursay.guelph.ca/council-composition. Okay, so all the questions and answers will end up there. So tonight, we got to make sure we grab all those questions. Okay, so you log into WebEx. You've already done that if you're hearing me. You're on Facebook at the City of Guelph Facebook page, or maybe you're watching live streaming on guelph.ca/live. On the live stream piece on guelph.ca, there's no comment box it can add your questions to. Only in WebEx and Facebook can you ask those questions directly this afternoon. But we still have options. Next slide. All right. So the idea is to provide all sorts of input, ask lots of questions, do your best to wrap your heads around the challenge in front of us. The place to do it is, as I said, and I'm going to keep repeating this, go to haveyoursay.guelph.ca/council-composition. When you get there, you'll be able to see there's background papers that explain a lot of what we're going over tonight. There's a video. This meeting is being recorded so that we'll be able to share the video or pieces of it. On that website, there'll be two mapping functions available to you. One of them provides all the different preliminary options one at a time. You can go in there and look at it. You can stick a pin on it. You can say, I think this boundary needs to shift here or there, or I like this, or I don't like that. You can leave your comments directly on those maps. There's also, which is really innovative, there's right on that main web page, there's a mapping tool that you can kind of play with. You can look at a map and turn on and off all the different options, and you can kind of compare them to your own satisfaction. You can play with them, okay? But most importantly, there's a survey on that site where you get to provide your suggestions and your input. That's the bottom line after you've played around enough with all of the exploring to do. Now, if that doesn't work for you, that's easy. You can send an email to clerks@guelph.ca. You can send a good old-fashioned letter to the city clerk's office at City Hall. But also, some phone times have been dedicated for people who would prefer to talk with somebody on the phone. And those people will take your input, and they'll probably be directing you through the same questions that you would have found on the online survey, so that they can take your comments and plump it straight into that survey, and your insights and wisdom will not be lost. Okay, next slide. Let me introduce the consulting team. First of all, the lead on this is Watson and Associates Economics, and they bring decades of experience in economic analysis and land analysis. And they've partnered with ICA Associates, which is the firm that I'm with, and with Dr. David Siegel, who is on the line and will be conducting some of the presentation, and Dr. Robert Williams, also on this call and conducting some of the presentation. Now, this team was retained back in January 2020, before COVID hit, and had to pivot, as they say these days, in order to work on the council composition and employment status review that ran through, it was on council's plate in November of 2020, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But now we're into the second phase, which is the ward boundary review, where we actually take a look at the existing ward boundaries and see how can they be improved. So let me introduce some of the team here. Eric Carvenin is a planning and land economic consultant. He's the lead on this project. He brings tons of experience in leading these kinds of ward boundary reviews, and his expertise is in the demographic analysis and growth forecasting and data modeling, all the behind the scenes stuff that puts real numbers on the maps that you'll be seeing later in this presentation. Then comes Dr. Robert Williams. He's a public affairs consultant. He was a professor of political science at the University of Waterloo. And he's been a consultant since 2008, and he's collaborated with Watson on numerous ward boundary reviews and council composition reviews. So this is an area of real expertise as well. And then comes Dr. David Siegel, also a retired professor of political science. He does municipal governments and administration consulting. He's also the founding director of the Niagara Community Observatory and the author of many books and articles on municipal governments and administration. So he brings that focus of expertise to this team as well. I'm John Miller, facilitator. I've been working at it for over 25 years. I'm far more accustomed to all that in-person work that you might have seen a facilitator work at, but we're doing it online these days. I also have some background in political science, so this is familiar territory for me as well. And I've collaborated with Watson and Associates on a couple of files like this as well. And so let me start off the kind of official part of this meeting and introduce you to Stephen O'Brien. He's the general manager and city clerk's office and the city clerk for the city of Guelph. Next slide.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Yeah, pleasure to be here. What I can say is we're very excited and very happy to have everyone who's joining online. As John alluded to, these are unique times. We've done one of these virtual town halls for this project already, and it's a different way to do things. But we nonetheless really greatly value and appreciate the community taking time to input on this project. To John's point, we all need to sort of chime in and add our voice so that we can make sure that council has the best recommendations possible before them. And so I'm thrilled to be here. I can share that I've been with the city of Guelph now for 6 years. Prior to joining Guelph, I was with Richmond Hill and York Region. I've got a lot of interest in this project, but a lot of interests generally in the municipal sector, and so I'm just thrilled to be part of this project and thrilled to help support the consultant team and hopefully help support the community in bringing forward some good recommendations to council. What I'd like to do at this point is just as we do for most, actually, quite frankly, all our meetings, is offer a territorial acknowledgement. As we gather, we are reminded that Guelph is situated on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. Today, we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe peoples on whose traditional territory we are meeting. And I'd also like to bring greetings from Mayor Guthrie and Council. They obviously have a monumental task of taking all the information that the consultant team is going to bring forward and distilling it and making a decision. They're the ones that will pass a bylaw at the end of the day on this project, and that's obviously a big task for them. I know that they really do appreciate the community's input as well on this project, and so on behalf of Mayor Guthrie and all of the members of Council, I want to thank again everyone for being here today and for participating both today, previously to this, and hopefully ongoing throughout the rest of the project. So thank you.
Okay, I will step in and move us along. Just for the benefit of our viewers today, this is the beginning of phase 2, but we went through a fairly extensive phase during 2020 where we were asked to consider a number of questions and provide some support for council's discussion of these matters. We provided a report to council in November 2020 that addressed 4 main questions. How many councillors are appropriate for the city of Guelph? Should the councillors continue to be elected in wards or in a citywide election? If there are to be wards, how many councillors in each ward? And the other final question is whether the city of Guelph would benefit from having city councillors who could devote themselves full-time to their council responsibilities, or should they remain part-time? So those are all things that emerge from the current structure. The report we took to council led to a direction, a resolution from council that we were to continue into phase 2, and that's the ward boundary review. In other words, council in that first bullet there made it clear that there will be a ward system in Guelph, not an at-large system. So we are asked to develop some alternatives for wards. In addition, we will be doing community engagement, and there will actually be 3 rounds of that. This is the second round of phase 2. And we were asked to consider scenarios, what we're going to call options or models rather, that include 8 counselors, 10 counselors, or 12 counselors. So that becomes part of the work we're going to do. That also involves discussing the number of counselors per ward. And again, we'll see how we play that into what's coming up later. And also then considering the employment status of counselors, and some of the options lend themselves more to part-time work, others to full-time, and some are a bit mixed. So again, we'll see that as we move through our remaining presentation. So what is a ward boundary review? And there are a number of things that that are part of that. The point is that this is, in a sense, a self-contained part of this review. The objective of a ward boundary review is to start with the existing wards to determine whether they are still suitable. That would assume that there were only 6, but even so, we need to examine the current wards in terms of some guiding principles that we'll be talking about shortly. So we start with what is already on the ground, if you will. And then we would develop alternative designs that are consistent with these guiding principles, but are there intended to reflect the present distribution, not only of the overall population, but the various neighborhoods within Guelph. So the systems are filtered through, if you will, the guiding principles and relate to the reality of Guelph's population and its distribution. It's important to note too that ward boundary reviews are not mandatory in Ontario. This is a decision made by council, but in fact in Guelph, this exercise of this kind that looked at the entire system has not occurred since 1991. That is 30 years ago. So the idea of a ward boundary review to look at the whole picture is something that is, if you will, overdue, whatever the outcome it might be. Now, as we said, we've had a form of public engagement, and it's still ongoing. But in the early part of the work, in the early part of this phase, we did some public consultations in January that allowed the community to provide us some perspectives on a number of the key questions. And that included an online engagement arrangement, 24 hours a day access through the website for 2.5 weeks. So we had a fairly large opportunity, again, probably as open and flexible as we could do in the virtual environment. We had 220 people who answered the online survey, a number that was very helpful to us to understand the questions that we're trying to address. At the same time, those questions and responses are not in a vacuum, if you will. There are extensive background documents and other contact information for respondents to ask questions, to get some answers, and to have those answers provided publicly so that, as John alluded to earlier, if you have a question, probably somebody else had the question, you could go in and see how that was answered and use that to build up your understanding of what we're trying to do. So we also are doing then a live stream town hall structured like a panel discussion to provide information on the ward boundary review. Again, we did that earlier. It's still available for viewing, as will this particular exercise also be available for viewing in the next few days or weeks, I guess, too. Okay, so guiding principles. Over to David.
Sorry, David, you're muted on this side. Apologies.
Yeah, okay. My apologies. Here we go. In making these decisions, we had certain guiding principles in mind. Now, there are no set provincial rules that have to be followed in establishing these ward boundaries, but there is a Supreme Court decision that was made a few years ago in what's commonly called the Carter case in Carter in Saskatchewan. And the court enunciated the idea of effective representation. So that's the kind of overriding principle that we have to think about. In terms of this particular exercise, we thought about 4 guiding principles. And these are not in any particular overriding order. One is representation by population. And effective representation means that you have one person, one vote, and that means that the wards should be of reasonably equal size. Second principle is projected growth patterns. Now, we're doing this exercise right now for the October 22 election, the next election, but we want what we come up with to have some sort of staying power. So we've made some forecasts out to 2031. So we hope that the ward boundaries that we're going to be setting at this point will cover the 2022 election, but also cover the next couple of elections. The next principle that we thought about was community of interest. Wards should represent a reasonably homogeneous area. There should be a community of interest. Now, sometimes a community of interest is represented by a neighborhood association, for example. Sometimes it's just a matter of similar income groups, similar socioeconomic groups living in a particular area. So we didn't want to draw lines, ward boundary lines, that divided communities. That was another principle that we had. And finally, we wanted to have a principle that the ward boundaries would follow natural boundaries of some kind. And the idea of natural boundaries are things like water courses, major highways, railways, major ravines. Some cities have major ravines running through them. Something like this that would help residents understand exactly where the boundaries were, rather than making arbitrary residential streets the dividing line. Now, I think you can see, and I'll give you some examples later on, but these guidelines can conflict with one another. So we asked in the survey that Bob and John have talked about, we asked people to tell us which one of these principles that they thought was predominant. And you'll see in the bar graph on the next slide that what people told us was that a significant number of people saw population parity as either the first or second priority. Over 50% of people saw this as either a first or second priority. So we kept that in mind when we were thinking about this. And the second place finisher in this was the idea of community of interest. 30% felt that the community of interest was an important principle. So we, in juggling and balancing these 4 principles in coming up with the ward boundary options, we kept this chart in mind. We kept this graph in mind, that the citizens of Guelph, the way they voted on this, they felt that population parity was important and community of interest was the second most important. So in the next slide, basically we're talking here about how respondents, how people responded to the essay, to the survey. And so we thought about these options as we were preparing our proposals. So Bob, do you want to tell us about the existing board structure?
Right, thank you. As we said earlier, sorry, John. Can't hear you, John.
Yeah.
No.
I'm going to try again. I just want to remind that if there are questions that arise or comments that pop into your head throughout this presentation, please put them in the chat, either on Facebook or WebEx. So if you had questions, for example, about the overall project, now would be a really good time to just simply unload those so that continue the rest of the presentation. I'm complete, sorry.
This is one of the joys of a live presentation, right? We have to work our way through these. Anyway, thanks, John. As we suggested earlier, one of the things we need to do with these principles is to see how the city's current electoral system stacks up. In other words, to try to identify whether changes should be made and to try to work through those principles to help us do that. And when you look at the map of the current wards, what you're really seeing is a set of lines that were drawn that were reflecting the distribution of communities and people across Guelph in 1990. So the question is, how has that changed? Obviously, some neighborhoods don't change. They're obviously still located where they are. They have neighbors that are similar, but there are other things that have come on to the scene, if you will, particularly in South Guelph and to some extent on the far western side. So the goal is to say we need a system that accurately reflects the contemporary distribution of communities. And so we start from where we are and move forward. The chart also on that slide shows us that there are huge disparities in the population of the various wards, both in 2021 and as we move out to 2030, one of the wards becomes basically 1.5 times the size of what I like to call an optimal ward. We don't have averages. Nobody likes an average ward. So the optimal size is, if you will, 1/6 of the population. And you'll see that in 2031, Ward 6 would be 1.5 times the size of that. Ward 3 would be less than 3/4 of that size. So there's a huge gap. We'll speak to that in a moment. The next slide is a way to capture the 5 principles, including effective representation, based on our preliminary assessment. And some of that is provided by the interviews we conducted with members of council. Some of it comes from the feedback from the early survey, and some of it just from our own analysis of population information and familiarity with Guelph itself. So on the chart, the middle column is saying, does the structure meet the principle? Representation by population? I'm afraid no. We've already just mentioned that a moment ago. One of the wards is higher than the ideal, and we're allowing, by the way, for 25% variation from optimal. So that's a pretty big step away from that optimal size. And there's another at the bottom. With the growth, we also suggest no, it doesn't fit, because as we pointed out a moment ago, one ward would be well above it, and 2 others, in fact, are below that range of variation. Communities of interest are largely successful. As suggested a moment ago, communities are not divided internally. They were not divided, generally speaking, when these boundaries were created, but there are a couple of exceptions. And the main one is downtown Guelph. Part of the question is what all we include in downtown Guelph, but if we take the very core around the central business district, that community, which is well established historically, and has a certain type of housing associated with it and so forth, that's actually part of 3 different wards. So there is no downtown voice by itself, it's split up. That may be desirable, it may not be, that's part of the discussion, but on the face of it, there is a community of interest that's divided. On the other side of the same principle are the fact that some of the wards don't consist of communities with common interests. Let me start with that reference to the downtown, that ward running all the way through from the core central business district through more established neighborhoods to the east of the Speed River, but then on out past Victoria Road into other kinds of neighborhoods that are much newer and much different types of demographics, if I can call it. Most of it's pretty good. There are some things that are not so good. When we count down to natural boundaries, and this may sound like it's a sort of a trite little factor, but as David suggested earlier, what we want to do is have people understand, oh, my ward runs up to that point and not beyond. And part of that captures a community. Very seldom would a community cross something like a river or a major rail line or a major arterial roadway. It's either one side or the other. So that works together. And what we find is that, in fact, many of those major natural boundaries are not, in fact, used within Guelph. So some wards actually cross some of these obvious barriers. So it's partly successful. And the last one, then, when we roll all of that together, if you will, we can't conclude that it's entirely a successful system of effective representation because, going back to the first point, the residents do not have an equitable voice on council. When some councillors put the hand up to vote, they're representing 70% of the population, or find the number here quickly, but bear with me, folks, live discussions. Some are voting on behalf of roughly 21,000 people, and others are voting on the behalf of 35,000 people. That, again, is not an equitable arrangement, and one that we believe should be better balanced out in future. So the survey responses help us flesh some of that out, and the next slide just talks very quickly about some of that, for many people, they view this system around the performance of their current councillors. And I need to make very clear, this is not a survey about the current councillors. It's about how the system works. Does this system work to gain good representation, or does it work against that possibility? Roughly half of respondents were happy with the current ward boundaries, feeling that it gives them effective representation. That's a reasonable perspective to say maybe we don't need to make change or not much change. But 35% said no, they didn't feel the current system provided them with effective representation because, again, I suspect in some cases the ward is much, much larger than many of the others. Access to elected officials is less easy. Various things of that sort get in the way of it. So the comment about the differences in the population of the wards that I've just referred to, and the fact that it's going to get worse, were probably the major factor for some of that view that there should be some changes. A few people also had very specific concerns about the way the particular wards were drawn, and we've also tried to keep that into mind as we come up with what we're now calling preliminary options. So very quickly, I just wanted to make a reference to that, and John will also jump in with another reminder.
Yeah, folks, now that we've covered a different topic area around the current situation, questions that popped into mind as you were listening to that presentation, put it into the chat there, please, because chances are other people have that same question. Or if there's some comments, something that comes to mind, then just put it there so that it's useful information for us as we move into the next round. Don't lose your thoughts. Put them right down, please.
Okay, so thank you. So the next slide is a different topic, and this is the beginning of where things get complicated, if I can say that, because if we go back to those directions that we got from council in November, it said, well, we can't quite decide how many councillors we should have, so give us some scenarios that involve different numbers. So that could be 8, it could be 10, it could be 12. But there was also that question of whether they should be elected in wards with one person or more than one. When we start to put those things together, it results in 6 different, what we're going to call models of representation. The model could elect 4 wards, 5 wards, 6 wards, 8 wards, 10 wards, or 12 wards, all of which feed into that 8, 10, or 12 councillors. So what we are organizing, our next part of this discussion is about the models, and then within that, what we're calling an option. So there's 2 different 4-ward options. There are 2 different 10-ward options. These are the ones that take the concept of 4 wards and look at it slightly differently. So in total, we've got 13 options for you to consider, and the next chart lays that out visually. My point is, don't be intimidated. we can help you. We've organized this in a way that we hope will make it easier for you to look at it at these levels, and to realize that it's like the 6-ward model gives you 3 different ways of getting to that end. But the first question has to be which of those models you think is the most appropriate. Now, the next slide is another just heads up, I guess I would call it, to what we're going to ask you to look at. There's a lot of material here. We agree with that, but we're simply following those directions that are there. And I'm encouraging those of you participating in the survey, and you look at these particular models and you look at the particular options, there are certain kinds of things that distinguish one from the other. And I encourage you to think about it in the sense that we've just laid them out here on the slide. Look at, for example, the scenarios from the point of view of how well they balance population. Some do better than others. How well they handle growth. Some do better than others. Look at those kinds of big questions. Also look at how the individual neighborhoods or communities are handled. We're pretty sure that there are some scenarios that are better at that than others, but you live in those neighborhoods, you can tell us that. We're pretty sure we have not divided them, but again, we've got a couple of ambiguities. What is the downtown? What is the junction? Is it captured the right way? And then how are they grouped together? Because as we get to more and more wards, we end up grouping things a little differently. Look also at the distribution of the wards, primarily from the north to the south, because we know that most of the growth is going to be in the south. Is the scenario that's played out going to handle that very well or not? The other part of that question, and it's in those comments, certain of these scenarios are more suitable for 2-member wards, others for 1 member. So if you have a thought that it should continue to be more than 1 member, then some of these are going to be more interesting than others. But then also look at the natural boundaries. What are the ones that have been used, and do they really reflect the way the neighborhoods within Guelph can be understood? So David's going to start to walk us through the 4-ward models of preliminary options, and I will pick up the comment in a few minutes.
Yeah, as Bob said, we're going to be taking you through a number of models fairly quickly. So you as residents who are going to participate in the survey need to think about this. You might want to think about how many counselors you'd like to have. And you might also look at these maps from the perspective of what they do with regard to your neighborhood. Do you feel that they fit with regard to your neighborhood very well? So we're going to start with a 4-ward model. Now, the 4-ward model works well with 8 counselors or 12 counselors. In other words, you could have 2 counselors per ward and end up with 8 counselors, or you could have 3 counselors per ward and end up with 12 counselors. Now, the first option that we're going to look at is labeled 4A, and 4A is gives you an idea of how the city could be divided into 4 wards, and it means that the wards are larger. That means that they will not have the same kind of tight communities of interest as they would if we had 6 or more wards. It also means that it's going to be a larger area for counselors to cover. Now, one thing I want you to notice about the ward in the center there, Ward 3, is we said that one of our principles was that we weren't going to cross natural boundaries. But if you look at Ward 3, and there's a northern kind of projection there that goes across the Speed River. Well, we listened to you, and you said that you were more concerned about population parity than you were about that principle about crossing natural boundaries. So in this case, we went against the principle that we had talked about with regard to natural boundaries because it gave us a better population balance. These are the sorts of things, and you'll see other things like this in some of the other wards that these are the sorts of things that you have to do when you're balancing for principles like this. So that's Ward 4. That's the option 4A. The next one is 4B. And 4B is clean and neat, and it's easy to understand. The north-south division is mostly the rivers, except in the eastern part. And the east-west division is Gordon Street and Woolwich. So it's very easy, very simple to figure out which ward you live in. One of the things you want to look at for these is what happens with population and what happens with population over time. We're not burdening you with population numbers here, but on the website, there's a paper which shows the population for 2021 and the projected population for 2031. What you'll see for 4B is that 4B is a bit problematic in 2021. Population parity is not ideal for 2021, but it becomes much better for 2031. So these are things that you have to weigh in making your decision as well. So that's those are the two options for the 4 ward. Next, we're going to talk about 5 wards. Now, 5 wards really is pretty much only going to work for 10 counselors. 2 counselors per ward gives you 10 counselors. Obviously, these wards are going to be a bit larger than what you're used to with the 6 ward system that you have now, but not like the 4 ward system. It's a kind of intermediate in that area. So if you look at 5A rather, the next option, and you see the division there. There's some similarity here with what we have in the 6 ward system, but there are some combinations. You know, the downtown is combined with the East End, and we heard from some people that was not a desirable combination, but if you want to have relatively large wards, such as only 5 wards, then those are sort of combinations that you're going to get. Now, these wards, if you look in the East End there, those 2 wards in the northeastern part are oriented east-west. When we go to 5B, the difference is that those 2 wards in the Northeast are oriented north-south, and that's pretty significant in terms of the different kinds of communities that are joined in those wards. So, you know, we value your feedback about what you think about that sort of combination. Now, the next group of wards we'll look at will be the 6 ward system. And this is what you're most familiar with, what Guelph has had for a number of years. This really works with a 2-member ward, 2 members per ward, which is what Guelph has had, and so it's what people are comfortable with. Option 6A is basically a variation on what you have now. So 6A is the first one that we'll be looking at, and there are some different boundaries there, and I think Bob explained why some of these boundaries have to be different, because there's a problem with regard to Ward 6 being the population there being too large. We need to adjust that, and particularly if we're thinking in terms of future, we need to adjust that. So some of these things are adjusted, but roughly speaking, this map looks a lot like the wards that you have right now. But as I mentioned earlier, what you should do is think about where your community fits here, and think about to what extent your community is grouped in the proper place. You know, are you grouped with common communities? Are you grouped with other communities, with other neighborhoods that you have a lot in common with, or is this too much of a stretch? So 6A rather, is basically a variation on on the existing situation. Option 6B, on the other hand, is a bit different. The eastern boundary, the eastern ward, is everything east of Victoria Road, and that's one thing that we heard was a good idea. The northern wards have this north-south orientation, and that was something that we heard was popular with some people. But again, this is, you want to think about where your community fits in here and how it relates to other communities that you would be grouped with. So the next option is option 6C, and that is really quite different from the others because there's more of a north-south orientation, even in the south, with regard to those wards around the university and west of the university area. So that's the sixth ward orientation. I'm going to pass it back to Bob, and Bob can deal with the larger number of wards here.
All right, thank you, Dave. Now, 8-ward models have a certain limitation. That's a different number than we've seen. It obviously, there's no appetite for 16 members of council, so we're looking at single-member wards. 8, of course, it would mean something a bit smaller than 6, and therefore certain dynamics around the size of the council. The other point to notice in that is that with fewer councillors, that may mean that these would be full-time. If there are 8, each with a single ward to look after, rather than having a ward partner, that could mean a full-time scenario. A separate discussion, but part of the bigger picture. Let's also then move on to options 8A and B. Let me just also quickly point out, you'll notice all of these are labeled preliminary option 8A, or whatever the number is. We're certainly asking you for thoughts about the bigger picture, but a couple of things are important. As David alluded to a moment ago, all of this material is on the website. You don't need to try to memorize these as you go by. We have trouble doing that, but you can go back and look at them more carefully. But the other reference is that these are preliminary. If you see in there that there's an idea that you like, but you're not quite sure about some little part of it, give us a comment. Let us know, because these are not going to be, if you will, carved in stone. It may very well be that there are suggestions that could improve what we've been able to do. Okay, very quickly then. Option 8A, 5 wards to the north, 3 to the south. So in a sense, it maintains the distribution of population favorably because the population is skewed toward the north. But by 2031, with only the 3 wards south of the river, that becomes less manageable. The other part to look at in here, of course, is that proposed Ward 3 really captures the downtown area in a single ward, within limits up to, I think that, I forgot if that's Norfolk Street on the left side, but anyway, one of those roadways, and then Aramasa Road, keeping it all clustered within the rivers. In 8B, we've got another take on that. The downtown looks a little different. And in the short term, population parity doesn't really work all that well. And this one, as we've noted here, is based on that 4-ward, the 4B quadrant. In other words, the quadrants are still there. We simply divided each one. That model was also one where population parity didn't really work. It was nice, clean lines, but the population was a little bit off kilter. And even if we divide them in a way that we think is plausible, that kind of imbalance is maintained in 8B. But again, maybe there are things in there that you see that could work, that could be an improvement. So let's keep that in mind as we go on to the 10-ward model. Again, into a new scenario for Guelph, a slight reduction from 12 councillors to 10. we did hear some support for that idea, but these would obviously still then be one member per ward. So that would be the change that we see in Guelph. Each one is a bit smaller, but fewer councillors in a one-member ward could also lead to full-time councillors. But again, the operative word is could. That is not a decision that would be made outside of the picture that this is drawing. So 10A is again looking at the distribution and the kind of boundaries that are used. We see that the area to the north of the Speed and Eramosis is contained in 4 wards, and the proposed Ward 6. Currently, the area to the north of the river is the built-up area. It's the part in the southern corner that the Guelph Innovation District that is yet to be populated. But even out through to 2031, that population parity can be maintained. Again, reading back through them, you'll notice in some scenarios you can get to population parity now, but lose it in the future. Some it's the other way around, and in a few cases it works in both. So in 10B, again, we're suggesting generally it's unfavorable. That is, there are weaknesses in it. It's not a perfect balance, but it grows a little bit better over time. One of the things that's interesting here, of course, is the way the boundaries that are actually used. The rivers, the Hanlon, those are used as significant barriers, with only one exception in the proposed Ward 9 that actually crosses the Hanlon. Again, it's not a top priority, but that becomes a real dilemma. How do you deal with that area, especially south of the river, on the west side of the Hanlon, that really isn't large enough for its own ward? You can do that in the north, and so you have to cross that line. Some of these scenarios you do, some you do it in only part of the ward. Finally, 12 ward options. Obviously, we're looking at single member wards. This would not see a change in the total number of councillors, but they would switch from being working in a, if you will, in a partnership or in a 2-member scenario to being basically individual members dealing with the community, dealing with calls from constituents, those kinds of things. Change the weight, although because there are smaller wards, it could still continue to be a part-time position. So 12A is adapted from the existing structure, the current 6 wards. It's not that they were each divided in half as such, but it works from that kind of a premise. And it's a generally good population balance. But of course, again, because of the way the lines are drawn, wards 1, 11, and 12 are going to grow, so that nice balance is lost a little bit over the next 10-year period. 12B, again, is drawn from the existing structure, but places far more wards to the north. Again, this is achieving parity in the shorter term that is less successful in the longer term. And again, part of the if you will, the surprises in here is when you do draw some of those lines and look for those groupings, this one ends up with a very small Ward 8, literally the old university area, that somehow becomes on the small side compared to some of the others. But it could be a modification that we could use. But do you cross Gordon Street or not? Do you cross Stone Road? What kinds of trade-offs do you make there? Okay, I'm going to move back to John, who can take us through the next steps.
There we go. Okay, there's a bit of lag. Sorry. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dave. Very informative, and I'm glad it's recorded so that people can play it back afterwards when they find it on the website. Let me just tell you where things are going from here. First of all, there are 3 rounds of public consultations during this phase alone, okay? It started in January, where we were asking people about how they would rank the guiding principles, what would be really important for the people of Guelph. And that gave direction to our team for the development of these preliminary options, which was viewed. So what's going on right now is taking a look at those preliminary options, which ones make the most sense, the least sense, and what would you recommend move forward. And then, so we're going to take all of the input that we receive from now until I think it's March 14th, and digest that as quickly as we can, and then based on that, develop a set of preferred options. I don't know, maybe there'll be one that comes screaming through and he says, we love this one. I don't know. So there'll be more than likely more than one option in order to reflect what the community is really important. So we'll take that shortlist back to the public in round 3 in April to get some additional feedback, again, from as many as possible, so that we can polish up a report that would go to council for their consideration. But in the end, as we heard before, this is input to a decision that council needs to make, and they'll be digesting this in May and hopefully coming to a decision in June. Okay. Next. Can I get the next slide, please, Stephen? Okay. So you've been digesting all of this information, and technically speaking, all of the options that were viable, right? The team worked really hard to find that balance and to meet the mandate that we were given. So then it becomes what makes the most sense for you in Guelph, okay? So there's trade-offs to be made, and it's not an easy decision. So even if you have just pieces of insight, we need to learn that too. So your job is to learn through this medium, through the website, ask lots of questions, share your insights and preferences, and persuade other people to get involved too. Next slide. So when it comes to learning, next slide. When it comes to learning, let me explain what you're going to find when you go to the haveyourguelph.ca/council-composition site. It's an engagement site, and on that site you can explore all the different word options. You can download the preliminary options, the report that upon which this presentation is based, and see all the background detail. You can print it off, you can scribble on it, you can put it on the kitchen table and talk with your family and your neighbors, pardon me, your neighbors. The dude on the phone 6 feet away from each other, right? There's also a really interesting tool when you get there where you can, if you feel kind of computer savvy, and don't worry, you can't break this tool, you'll see the map and you can turn on and off all of these different word options, and you can then just compare them, one laid over top of the other, and you can just on, off, on, off, on, off, and it's really good to help you start to see how these things compare. Quite a creative innovation that is available to you. There's also a map function where you can look at each map and its data separately, okay? So without all these layers, but separately. And then you can put your insights directly on those map pin, right? And you can, it'd be very educational to take a look at the questions and answers section of that website. Because all the questions that got raised today and all the ones that had come up to now and the ones that are going to come after this, they're all going to be asked right there. Just as when we're done this presentation, we're going to put questions to the panelists. Next slide. So sharing your thoughts on this website, you can put pins on the map with specific suggestions, but most importantly really is there's a survey, okay? It's a survey of options to choose from, right? So the questions are, which preliminary options would you remove from consideration? These 3 are just, don't even look at them any further. So you can indicate those. The next question is, which ones would you support for further consideration? So you say, these ones are my favorites, right? And why? And then we give the chance to say, okay, here's the one preliminary option that I would support the most. Okay. got a real favorite from amongst them, you say so and why, right? And then finally, when you've considered, here's my favorite option, the last question is then, how, would you see that the counselors being represented in that option, would they be doing that work full-time or part-time? Okay. So there's lots of questions. You've been asking questions in the chat on Facebook and on plus on the website, there's this Q&A section where you can go in, not just read the questions and answers, but you can ask your questions and answers, get answers there as well. Okay, you can ask more questions. And you can give us a call and talk to people on the phone and ask more questions. And of course, talk about it with your friends. Next slide, please. I want to point out that there is another town hall meeting, just like this one, on Wednesday, March 10th at 7 p.m. Okay. And this one today is kind of like a launch, beginning of the consultation period. The March 10th one, you may actually have similar people coming back and saying, now that I've reviewed the report, I've got more questions. So that's great. And you also, if you remind your friends and neighbors to come to it, they might find it interesting as well. But there's a lot of people who would rather just talk with you over the phone. So we've scheduled all these call-in times. You can call pretty much any time. But this information is also on the website. There's lots of call-in times and specific phone numbers. You call people, they might be able to answer your questions or find the answers. And they would probably, if you want to provide your input, they can ask the questions that are in the survey, and they can type your answers directly into that survey for you. If you have any at all, website. Next slide. So now we're into the questions and answers time. And what we'll be doing here is we've been collecting your questions as they come up from Facebook and on the WebEx chat, and we'll be just putting them to the panelists here. There might be, it might be Bob, it might be Dave, but some of these questions might be appropriate for Eric too. Eric Carvenin, who was introduced at the beginning, he's here because he has a technical area of expertise that might help. Okay, so let me get down to these questions. Some of the ones that I noted were, what considerations went into the 2031 population projections? What did you include in that calculation? If you could, please. I don't know, maybe it's an Eric question, or?
Yeah, my sense is that that's an Eric question. The general perspective would be that these numbers are developed from information available from the city's planning department and related parts of the city structure, where that information is tracked and is used as part of official plans and other kinds of matters. That's not my area of direct expertise, but I can tell you that has been a very careful part of this exercise to understand where the development will happen, whether it's intensification, greenfield, whatever, and the scale of it, as well as the timing. And so some of the things that we use have understood that, for example, development will happen at a certain sequence related, say, to South Guelph as opposed to the east side of Guelph. So those are all part of what go into those calculations and allow us to anticipate where that will happen and when it will happen. Many of the things that that people have talked about won't happen in the 3 election cycle and may come later. So we do pay a fair bit of attention to how that is handled. And I see Eric is on there now, and I'll let him jump in and respond. And I'm not.
Good afternoon. Eric Carvenin here with Watson and Associates. Thanks, Bob, for the follow-up response. Yeah, certainly for an assignment of this nature, understanding the growth metrics in the city, both in terms of establishing the current population estimate for 2021, as well as an estimate for 2031, has been an important technical deliverable for us to really understand population parity and population balance by ward, and really allow us to be able to generate these preliminary options and to evaluate the existing ward structure as well. So the population growth that's been anticipated through 2031 was prepared in accordance with the city's current official plan, which identifies a population of 175,000 people, census population, that is, by 2031. And then in addition, we've looked at post-secondary students who aren't currently captured in those census population metrics, and those students have been layered on to that overall population for that 10-year period. The allocation of growth has been determined through a thorough analysis of residential supply opportunities and discussions with city planning staff to understand ultimately where the city anticipates population and housing growth to occur over the next decade, and is a combination of both assumptions on intensification, particularly in the downtown area, and other intensification nodes and corridors, as well as greenfield locations, including the Guelph Innovation District and the Clare Maltby Secondary Plan area. So again, if there's any further questions on that, I'm happy to provide some answers.
Okay, a similar question, and maybe it's a shorter question. Why was a 10-year growth projection used? Why 10 years? And the example was, well, we know that Clare Maltby will not be built out until 2040. Why not? I think the implication of the question is, why not longer than 10 years? But why 10 years?
I can probably answer that one as well. Well, the terms of reference for this study asks us to understand growth and population patterns over the next decade, essentially allowing us to determine a ward boundary configuration that would work for at least 3 municipal elections. And so that would take us through 2030. 2031 as a target year was reasonable because it is consistent with the city's official plan population target, which I mentioned earlier. We do recognize that, historically the city of Guelph has seen very strong population growth, and certainly that is expected to continue over the next decade. And certainly as we move into 2041 and 2051, there will be significant population growth beyond 2031, and especially in many of these locations such as Clare Maltby and the Guelph Innovation District will continue to expand and grow post 2031. And it really emphasizes the fact that this exercise really positions the city for the next decade. And with the continued growth that's anticipated, a similar ward boundary review will need to occur again in the future to address future population growth and distribution patterns.
Okay.
Can I jump in there, John?
Absolutely.
Some non-technical things. Eric's point is well taken that 3 elections, if we can be reasonably confident, but it's certainly possible for that to be reviewed before that time. So the second point is that after every municipal election, the clerk would be providing a report to council on the election, which presumably would monitor questions about growth and whether the population of the wards has remained reasonably stable. If for some reason things happen much differently than anticipated, the idea of waiting wouldn't necessarily be there. And the other kind of non-technical reason, the 3 election cycle is at the moment 12 years, but federal electoral boundaries are reviewed every 10 years. That's the standard practice, and it has been there since 1867. It is mandatory to review boundaries after every census. So the idea of 3 cycles, 10 years, close enough that it would be following a pattern, but it builds on the point Eric just made. It encourages the municipality to think about doing this on a regular basis rather than what we might call a discretionary basis, doing it whenever you feel like it. It's probably appropriate to think about doing this, especially if the growth is going to be in the range that we're talking about. Make it something that happens as a matter of routine.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Anything we missed, Dave? Or is that about cover it? Then a different kind of a question here. If we chose to go with a smaller council size, how does that affect the ability of new councillors to enter municipal politics? So I don't know if you want to take that, Bob, or maybe
Well, I can
Dave.
try.
You can try.
I suppose it's not directly driven by creating opportunities. I think the opportunities are kind of really going to come from what those wards look like and where those aspiring individuals feel that they can be successful in seeking a place on council. Again, there's unfortunately too many combinations here, but if we're talking about going from 12 to 8, and is it 4 wards or 8 wards? Too many dynamics to be able to say definitively that one is going to be advantageous over another. Again, the idea of creating wards that are coherent and as balanced as possible could be of interest and making candidacy more attractive. But whether it's going to suddenly, if you will, open the taps up to lots of candidates, I don't know that I could say that. Not sure if Dave has any thoughts about that he'd like to share.
Dave, if you're talking, your mic's off. You are muted.
No, I think Bob's covered it very well. I don't have anything to add to that. So
Yeah. So basically, within the field of political science, anyway, there isn't definitive evidence one way or the other.
Yeah.
By the sound of it.
I don't think we can say that a certain structure is going to be lead to a certain outcome of who gets elected or who can campaign more successfully. I just don't think you can make that kind of a cause and effect.
Okay. Okay, we got another, we actually have a number of rather technical questions today. One is, thank you very much for adding the ward model population data set to the Have Your Say website. So for those of you listening, that exists, okay? Can you overlay the figures onto a PDF map of Guelph to allow people to make their own balanced ward suggestions? Is that even possible? Is that going to be functional? Can you actually lay those data set figures onto a PDF map of Guelph so that people can, I guess, doodle up their own suggestions?
I'm going to have to defer to Eric on that one.
I can probably answer that one. Yeah, it's definitely possible. Certainly, you can appreciate that we have had to identify those population metrics that I mentioned earlier at a neighborhood level, and they have been mapped out accordingly. We have provided those metrics to the public to utilize in a GIS-based format, and my understanding is those are currently available for people to utilize. As far as any PDF mapping, certainly that's something that we can look at doing. It does become a bit time intensive to do those sorts of manual queries because the community level population polygons are quite small in many cases and would be fairly time intensive to manually add up. But certainly that could be provided if it's of merit.
Okay. Another fairly technical question to do with mapping again is, when making the maps, is it possible to have some sort of delineation of the strictly non-residential employment lands? I think this is because when you're looking at the big picture, sometimes you see, let's say, a large ward and you don't quite appreciate that part of it nobody lives in. That's why it's big. But is it possible to delineate non-residential lands in these kinds of maps?
I guess maybe a good one for me to jump in on. Yeah, no, certainly, sort of following up on the earlier comment about PDF maps with additional mapping layers, including population metrics and land use, could be provided. I would probably suggest that perhaps the city's official plan land use mapping layer would be an appropriate one to use in this context. It would provide for, the various residential land uses in the city, as well as non-residential, which would include the city's employment areas, which are largely concentrated in the northwest and also along the Hanlon Expressway in South Guelph, and certainly would provide for some context to that discussion about why certain areas just generally have lower population densities, because ultimately they're not accommodating residential or housing development. So I think that's something we could certainly look at and provide.
Okay, cool, thank you. There's another question around I think I may have to answer this one. It has to do with when were public notifications about this town hall and the latest report published, and what methods were used to communicate this notification, right? And so our panelists are not going to be up on that, but I do have a list of answers that I can read, okay? The report, the preliminary options report, was published online yesterday. That's sort of the launch of this whole round of public consultations. Notice of this town hall was posted a week ago on this project page that I keep repeating the name of, and on the city events calendar. Also, there was a media release yesterday with the dates sent to all the media and posted to this website as well, sort of for the launch of this round of consultation. There is a project timeline on the project webpage that includes information about this town hall. There were social media posts that the city was able to broadcast on Twitter and Facebook, and just announcing that the town hall is going to be live streamed. And also announcing, all of this is announcing that there is another town hall in the middle of the consultation period on March 10th at 7 p.m. Additionally, this meeting will be recorded and posted and be available to share online. And the next town hall will also be promoted with the same modes, plus the city news section of the newspaper for the next 2 weeks. And there's an online engagement newsletter that comes out in March. So this engagement has a fairly large window of 24 hours a day engagement, but the promotion of it was just before. Okay. And
yeah, John, can I jump in on that too? All of what you've mentioned, John, is absolutely accurate. And then what we've attempted to do with this round is really bookend this engagement with a town hall, this town hall that we're in right now, then the one that you mentioned, John, at the end. So, get the information out, immediately include people in the option to join a town hall, see the options, learn about the options, hear firsthand, have that recording available. And then again, at that town hall in March, then folks can have, and I think it was Bob, I think you mentioned it, the ability for folks to come back and say, okay, now I've had a chance to digest this, I've had a chance to look at it, now I have a little bit more specific questions about some of the options that are available. So, and then of course that all is going to be, there's another round in April as well. So lots more opportunities for people to get involved and continue to be involved.
Yes, and actually when people go to the website, there's a button there that says register. People can actually add their email address to that, in that environment there, and then they will automatically get some updates as well. I think I've covered all the questions that have come up during this conversation, and I'm wondering if the other, let's see now, all are here. I'm wondering if we want to, it is now 2:49. We've got 10 more minutes left in our window. Did we want to just open up the mic to whoever's here, ask further questions verbally? We've done that in other scenarios, but we have 10 more minutes. And I've run out of typed up, written down questions here.
we'll see if folks have anything. Just give us a second.
Yeah. I think we can have more of a conversation if people want to have that. And while we're waiting for that to happen, I would just remind attendees of the guiding principles at the beginning, that, you know, there's no wrong answers. We need everybody's wisdom to have the wisest results in the end. And courtesy, obviously. One of the rules basically is any off-color stuff is not going to be shared with the general public.
We have a handful of folks that are in on the call right now.
Yep.
We're getting close to the end in the last sort of 10 minutes of the time we've allotted. We can unmute and let individuals ask questions if they have any off the floor. John, if you want to do that, you'll have to sort of be in a position to be able to manage that and maybe ask if there's a question, someone can just sort of vocalize in themselves and maybe introduce themselves, and we can take questions from that way if that works. Is that fair, John?
That's what I'm trying to say, yes.
Sure, okay.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people remaining online.
Yeah, so we've unmuted all the folks that are attending. So if anyone does want to have any questions themselves, they want to jump in, maybe just you'll have to sort of vocally introduce yourself, and then John can sort of handle it from there, and maybe we can sort of best direct the questions from there.
Okay. So I'm going to run down the list then. There's someone here by the name of Morgan. Is there something you'd like to say or ask?
It has been awesome doing this. I'm looking forward to the one toward the end of the session. My question is, I'm involved with Breezy Breakfast. So I know that Mr. O'Brien, you're very familiar with Breezy Breakfast, and I have a feeling that some of the individuals with Watson are as well. Just wondering, considering that it is a forum that a lot of politically active people in our city attend, if we could potentially have a similar presentation during the next couple of weeks, if we can talk to the councillors about getting that done.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that. Thanks, Morgan. Nice to hear your voice. Usually it's at council meetings. You come through as a delegate, so it's certainly nice to hear you in this forum. I think as Councillor Gordon and Councillor Alta, who I'm most familiar with, are involved with the Breezy Breakfast, if they want to reach out, and I forgive me, I can't remember the gentleman's name yes, thank you. Yeah, reach out to myself. We can certainly attend. It probably will be a lot of sort of pointing individuals to the existing material that's online, and we can be in a position to answer some of the sort of higher order questions. Really, I think we're going to be able to get and tease out a lot more what the community might be interested in, and I would strongly encourage any of those that are regular attendees to the Breezy Breakfast to perhaps join in for the next panel. But and then that way those questions can be fleshed out a bit more. It can be documented, it can be recorded, etc. Onto the haveyoursay.guelph.ca website. But yeah, have the team at Breezy Breakfasts reach out to me, and we can sort of help manage something and get a sense of how much time we might have to be able to attend and present in that regard.
Cool.
Excellent, thank you.
So let me move down. Alan, is there any other additional questions you'd like to ask or comments you need to make?
Not right now, but I will be submitting some proposals of my own, so
Awesome.
I'll be interested in hearing some feedback about those.
All right, thank you, Alan. Kevin.
You're welcome.
Kevin, additional questions or comments?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. We've caught a few of the written comments, so we very much appreciate that. Richard, any other additional questions or comments you'd like to pose to the panel? You are muted, Richard.
Oh, sorry, nothing to add.
I got the same problem. You're still muted.
No, you mentioned there was nothing to add, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me.
Yeah.
Then we're down to Ken. Ken, is there anything that you would like to add? Questions or comments?
No additions at this point.
You're good. All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. That's everybody. Any other?
Sorry, John, wondering if I could just ask one other quick question. Oh, and it just, you know, when you have that question at top of mind and then all of a sudden it disappears.
Is this Morgan again?
Yes,
Okay.
I've forgotten my question now. Sorry.
Morgan, if it pops in your head, you saw all the great contact detail that was on the slide deck. You can email us. You can post it on haveyoursay.guelph.ca so that others can see the answer. Yeah, if it comes back in your mind or comes to the tip of your tongue, then by all means use those avenues available.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you. So therefore, if we've covered all the questions and we finished the presentation and we're 5 minutes early, we could end a meeting 5 minutes early, and I love it when meetings end early. That wasn't the intention here, but we are here for any additional comments or questions if anybody has them. So
maybe I'll just wrap up, John, if that's that works. I think we can certainly end. I think we've had really good discussion. There's been some great questions that came through. I love the technical questions that have come through. I think that's great to see that. We are really looking forward to more questions. So my sort of call out to the community, if you're watching this recorded after the fact, is take the time to go to haveyoursay.guelph.ca, find this project page, ask questions, engage, look at the maps, look at the documentation that's available, and we really look forward to this next town hall that is coming up, because I think it's a lot, right? Recognizing and acknowledging this has been out for but a day, and so there's a lot to digest. So we really encourage folks to take a look at those maps, look at those different layers of the maps, and think about if it fits for you, if there's things that jump out or concern you. This deliverable, when we get to council at the time, will only be as good as much input as we get into it. So I welcome all of that from the community, and I'm sure council will as well. So obviously, thanks to Dave, Bob, Eric, John, and the whole crew behind the scenes. There's a lot of other folks that are not on the screen that are organizing this and coordinating, and a big shout out to them. They know who they are. And I think we can leave it at that, John. It's really, really great. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
all right. Thank you very much. Take care, folks.